I'm Ryan Pack.
And I'm Nicole Barlow.
And this is Soundtrack Your Life, where we talk to a guest. Today we're not going to, well, I guess it's still a soundtrack that they feel connected to, but we're going to actually talk to a composer and some of the soundtracks that they have worked on. So today we have composer Jermaine Stegall on the podcast. Welcome, Jermaine.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So Jermaine has composed for a lot of different films, most recently the Wendy and Peter. Is it a movie or is it a series?
I was called in to help provide support and additional music on Peter Pan and Wendy. So it's a movie that's on Disney Plus now.
But also Praise This, which just came out as well this year. And then, you've been busy with, last year you did Senior Year.
Yep.
Which stars Rebel Wilson. And in 2021, you did Coming to America 2.
Yeah. It's a fun one right there. They're all fun.
But before we get to Jermaine, the composer, can we get into Jermaine, the musician? Like, what kind of instruments did you start on? How did you kind of get into music?
My first instrument that I played was violin. Started in third grade, and after 3 weeks of playing that, I quit because I didn't like practicing. I walked in and said, "I don't like practicing this thing. I quit. I quit." And then the following year in fourth grade, I asked my parents if I could play saxophone and said, "No, you quit violin after 3 weeks. You think we're going to let you do that? But if you're serious, ask us again in a year." And little did I know, I marked it in my calendar and to the day pretty much asked them, "Hey, remember a year ago when you said I could play saxophone?" If I remember it. So anyway, in fifth grade, I started playing saxophone and played through junior high and high school. And my senior year, by the way, when I started playing saxophone, I knew that I wanted to have a career in music. I just didn't know what.
Wow.
In my mind, I think I equated saxophone to playing solos on pop songs on the bridge. That was going to be my career, one at a time. Before I went to college to major in saxophone performance, the summer of 1995, and I saw the movie Apollo 13. And for me, when the rocket ship took off, that was the light bulb moment that someone was doing this stuff on purpose. It was just too synchronized, too perfectly, and that was a James Horner score. So the next 5 years of undergrad were all about how do I connect saxophone performance to scoring or my love of movies, because I grew up watching tons of movies. We used to record movies off of television on VCR. My older brother had cable, and he used to bring the cable guide over. It was my half brother. He didn't live with us. He used to bring the cable guide over and say, "Circle any movie you want." So he'd fill up movies with, each tape with VHS tape with 3 movies per tape, and I created this giant movie library of stuff that I would watch over and over and over again. I didn't realize that I was noticing the score or who was writing the music. I didn't realize any of that at all. Someone pointed it out when I got to college that it seemed like my CD collection was heavy on the soundtrack side. Like, do you ever think about going to composition? Like, no. I don't understand theory. That's crazy. No way. But I do like film scores, I guess, now that you mention it. So, fast forwarding through that, I would say probably 97, Titanic came out. I had gone back and forth with this idea of composing or writing music, and when the Titanic came out, that was the moment I was like, okay, film scoring is going to be a thing. I don't know how I'm going to get there. It sounds utterly unattainable and crazy and so far away, and I don't know the first thing about theory or syncing music to picture at all. The technical stuff, that sounds crazy, but it's secretly in the back of my mind that is happening for sure. That was 97. That summer I saw the movie Scream on a VHS tape. It was a year old. It had been out in theaters, and I remember that music. The movie had a cold open. Honestly, it was the first time I couldn't tell what was happening or how the composer was getting that sound. And the cold open, it didn't show the credits, so I didn't say who the composer was. And I remember pausing the end credits. Marco Beltrami did the score to that movie, and I was like, Marco Beltrami, who's this guy? Marco Beltrami. Anyway, it turns out that Marco went to USC. James Horner was affiliated with USC, so a lot of roads started leading to you need to figure out how to get to USC. So to fast forward, I ended up getting a master's in composition at University of North Texas from 2000 to 2003, and applied a year early to get into USC's program because I heard it was a waiting list. Got in a year early, was on the waiting list exactly like I suspected, which was great because I still had another year to do of graduate school. And then in 2003, we moved to LA, got married that July, moved to LA in August. Everything was all fresh. I had this plan. Ask everyone you know, where can I find Marco Beltrami? Asked every teacher. I emailed his agents. We had a teacher, Christopher Young, composer, who was teaching adjunct as a part of the program. The first time I met him, first thing I asked him, I was like, great to meet you, Chris Young. Do you know Marco Beltrami? I finally met the guy, and I remember to the day I saw Chris Young last week, actually. I told him February 25th, 2004, he visited Chris Young's class, and I was utterly speechless. The first time I was ever rendered speechless. Couldn't put two words together, literally. I tried twice, a half hour from each other. Still couldn't talk to him. Anyway, fast forward, I ended up being his intern on the film I, Robot, which apparently I was his first intern. So it was really nice to watch a hero not only score a movie and save the day because it was a replacement score, but got to meet a ton of his orchestrators, go to all the sessions, meet the copyists, meet the conductor, it's kind of a fast tracking into watching an emergency level project actually happen, which was a giant hit, and especially big for him in his career. He was already big in my mind, but it launched him into another stratosphere. And so, I've been in touch with him, and you mentioned Scream 4 years later, around, I think it was 2010 or 2011, I was able to write some additional music with him on Scream 4, which was just a full circle moment for me to actually be the guy that was writing the scene that is basically, it's an homage. The opening of Scream 4 is an homage to the first film, how the first film opens with that phone call. And they happen throughout all the franchise, but it was a kind of a magical thing to be sitting there and looking at the Dimension logo and thinking about how impressed I was with his stuff, and just be working with him on that was pretty crazy. So that was kind of my part of my intro into, this universe of doing this stuff.
I love that. I think that's such a cool story. Have passion, be brilliant, and stalk your heroes, I think is the basic takeaway.
The moral, yeah.
Stalk your heroes to the end of the earth, and you're gonna be okay. That's incredible. When I saw Scream 4 and started to explore that soundtrack as part of your portfolio, the first thing that came to my mind is that you have to be passionate about horror. And how do you approach a score for a horror movie, for a thriller, as opposed to approaching it for maybe a different genre?
Well, that's an interesting question for two reasons. Number one, Marco to this day still claims to have never seen a horror film when he got the opportunity to demo for Scream 1.
No way.
And for me, I wasn't really a fan of horror growing up, but after I saw his movie, I did tumble pretty heavily down this rabbit hole of horror film research and directors and pursuing horror films because he did that. And it was always about the music. It didn't hit me actually until I worked on that with him that it was always about the music. And I had, a lot of horror films, they have low budgets to no budgets. And, that's the good takeaway is that, you tend to be able to do a lot of stuff and experiment a lot. I did a film in 2021, just after coming to America, that hasn't come out yet for Universal, called Oracle, which is also a horror film, where for the first 3 months, to answer your question, I just experimented and made musical sounds and recorded them and manipulated them with other sound design folks, and then used that as a template before I even started writing music, because I wanted to have that sense of freshness that I felt like I experienced when I watched some of those movies where I couldn't tell what was going on. It took some sounds inside the piano, or actually my saxophone playing something called multiphonics, which is when you play a note and you get two or three notes at the same time, and try to make some musical patches out of that. And it's all about the process, of discovery. Like, you start with one sound, it becomes another thing, and that's where you get away with so much in those experimental thriller horror genres. So yeah.
No, it seems really fun because you can kind of experiment with the bizarre, and you can do soundscapes, you can build tension. It seems like something really fun to work on. We don't always talk about horror and thrillers on this pod, but it was really cool to listen to that scoring.
Yeah, it was fun. It's all fun if you make it fun.
So I mean, obviously you don't get to start as a composer, right? Like, you intern for Marco, and then I guess you're credited as additional music for a lot of things as you were building up to being a composer.
Yeah.
How did you start working on projects in that fashion?
Well, actually, yeah. I actually, all the time after I got out of USC, I was pursuing, short films, feature films. I actually got a film in 2006 that was released by Warner Brothers Mexico, and it was in theaters in Mexico, and it was entirely in Spanish, from a cold call or email that I sent out back then. And between that and a few other indie films, some Lionsgate films, some directed video back when there was video, DVDs or VHS or whatever we had back then. I was always, pursuing, here and there, the opportunity to do movies on some of the bigger stuff while I was still building my own credits, doing some of the, indie features. Sometimes they didn't get distribution, sometimes they did. It all kind of just went hand in hand. Peter Pan and Wendy thing, I have to mention, that was really more about collaboration and offering support. Daniel Hart's the composer of that movie, and he was actually a fan of mine, and he just thought it'd be great to see what I did, and just have a moment of collaboration. It's really, in terms of the community, the camaraderie of composers in our community. Like, every now and then it's possible to do something where you truly collaborate and you go back and forth and see where it takes you, somewhere you might not have thought, similar to some of the stuff that I've done with Christoph Beck, who's another composer that I've collaborated with on a couple things. He knows my affinity towards Christmas movies, my love of John Williams, and some of these things lined up at just the right time. It's funny, when we were working on, I think it was the Christmas Chronicles 2, I feel like during that time, he actually didn't know I was doing Coming to America, which it was funny because he mentioned to me he thought about, going out to demo for that movie, and I thought, how funny would it be to go out for the same movie and have me get it, and then it's something Christopher Young always said. You think that's the moment where your proudest moment as a mentor or a teacher is to have your students beat you out for jobs. But, and I was like, really? I thought you'd be upset about that. But anyway, he didn't compete for it, but he thought it was great that I was doing that without telling him.
I think Christoph Beck is also a USC alum.
He is. He was in the program with Marco. Beltrami.
Okay.
To my knowledge, in Contact One of them, I think Marco had no gear when it was time to do the demo, and he used Christoph Beck's studio to do the demo that got Scream the first one. So yeah.
That's a really funny. I mean, I guess if you're going to lose to somebody, it ought to be somebody that you trained and
Oh
mentored.
yeah,
So at
yeah.
least you know
Or
you
you
get a
like
little.
them. At least you like them.
Yeah, you like them, you know them. You go bump
You
from
know.
that. Like that's I did that. So it's
Oh,
me
oh,
kind
that's
of,
good.
you know, like
Yeah, yeah. You know.
you mentioned John Williams, and John Williams obviously being behind so many iconic scores and being such a hero to so many, and
Hmm.
you worked on a score for Star Wars Stories and
Mm.
collaborated on the Peter Pan and Wendy movie that's out now on Disney Plus. I mean, how does it feel to work on such big properties like Star Wars, like Disney? Is it intimidating? Do you go into it like under the shadow of a John Williams, or do you just go into it, trying to build your own place?
Well, you know what's funny about that is we actually, when we first started it, well, first of all, the one of the producers of that never really our Star Wars stories didn't intend to have an original score at first. We were just catching up, at a certain point over coffee or lunch, and we were just brainstorming. He was telling me about the fact that it was coming up, and it sounded interesting. And when we decided to do original scores for what's kind of a docu-series or a documentary style thing, the idea of doing each episode in the style of whatever Star Wars the people are talking about during that moment is really what the approach evolved to. And that wasn't the thing at first. It was just kind of like, it's Star Wars, do something that's appropriate for the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But there did some comments did come down the chain saying to make sure not to use John Williams themes, but it's okay if it gives a nod to the sound. So in those they actually talk about pretty much everything from episode 1 through 9, as they talk to the interviewees. And so for me, the approach really became, how do I sound like what they're talking about? Sometimes they're talking about Ewoks, or they're talking about Vader, or they're talking about the Force. So like the idea is, it's underscore and it's more documentary style, but it's okay to be sweeping orchestral music in the style of John Williams if appropriate, or if they talk about Solo, it's okay to be anything in that universe.
Yeah.
So that was fun, because I didn't plan it to be that way. It evolved into, oh, that's the style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds fun, but also like maybe a challenging tightrope to walk. So you're being referential, but you're not picking stuff up.
Hmm. Yeah, it was. But
Do
it
you
was
have a
fun.
favorite John Williams piece? I'm so curious. Like we have to ask a composer hour, and people have to know.
I mean, for sure, I would say Star Wars is definitely my favorite. It's just kind of all encompassing, and it seems like it's reached a long time ago the point of being timeless somehow, and will forever be. I have to mention something only because it's sitting here, and I just opened it today. He didn't ask me to promote this, but I just purchased the reissued soundtrack of Sabrina, which also came out in 1995, the year I saw Apollo 13. Came out in December of that year. I saw that movie with my dad, and this movie is such a jazzy, beautiful, lush. I don't know if you've seen this movie or the original, but it's a very much a nod to the golden age of Hollywood and the sweeping romantic styles of of scoring and storytelling. Like it's full on jazzy old, that 50s sweeping style. That's my favorite sound. So I'm mentioning that because it's up there. I used to fall asleep to that CD every night back when I when we had CD players. Remember those days?
I remember, yeah. No, we're
Yeah.
definitely in your cohort. We're old enough to remember
Okay, good.
CDs and
Yeah.
Walkmans and yeah, the VHS
All
tapes from
that
the
good
cool older
stuff.
brother. All the stuff that you're mentioning is,
All
we
that good
get it.
stuff.
80s kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I love that stuff. My favorite movie of all time is The Wizard of Oz, for what it's worth, and that's 1939. So that's a pinnacle of the definition of the golden age of Hollywood in terms of sound and scope and sweep and dramatic storytelling with an orchestra. Um, that seems like it would have been a dream gig, for someone with an affinity toward that sound and that style and those chops. Doesn't happen every day, and that's why I feel like I don't know. I'm just swimming in this CD right now. No one's asking me to promote it, but I can't stop listening to the Sabrina
No,
soundtrack
I
right
love
now.
that. It's a great tip. I feel like that's a soundtrack we need to revisit.
Oh, this reissue is insanely good. There's so much unused stuff. Beautiful.
So you can go from, working kind of in a more traditional sense with kind of the Star Wars stories score, and then you can jump into the Coming to America 2 soundtrack, which, has elements of like, yeah, it's so good. It's got like Afro pop
It's
in
so
there.
good.
Oh, thank you.
It's got a lot going on, like, and then you're mixing that with pop songs, like soundtrack songs as well, right?
Yeah, it was interesting. Part of actually how I got that job is, we were just having a general meeting and talking about the fact that it was coming up, and I felt like there was absolutely no way that my name would be thrown in the hat for it. But when it was suggested that I meet with the director, I decided to write some original music before we met, just in case he wanted to talk about what my interests were. And part of how I got that was they needed a lot of on-camera music to shoot to that was original music. So I started writing music for scenes like, I don't know if you remember the Bo Staff sparring scene where Eddie Murphy's character is sparring with his daughters and there's percussionists on set. So, I wrote some music kind of for that ended up being something they needed to play while they were filming. So the drummers were actually pantomiming properly. And also there's a major funeral sequence in the movie that there's a lot of dance numbers, and there's supposed to be all these musical cues that segue from songs into score and out of score into and vice versa. So I started writing things that I thought could work for that. And there's a certain point where they were just like, we should just hire the guy. We're using it and it's working. Like, and and again, that stuff ended up going straight into the edit as they were cutting the movie, and it made the process really seamless. So there's some scenes in the film where there's something called a coronation, where there's a kind of a party, and there's an Afro centric ish, um, uh, ensemble basically on stage and on camera playing instruments. So I needed to write music basically that it takes place at this party. It's their party music. Some source music basically, which is a rare thing to be asked to do, and then also to be on set for supervising that stuff. So that was another fun thing that you're talking about, being involved. I didn't think that it would come to that, but even the Gladys Knight recordings, Gladys Knight's in the, for anyone that hasn't seen it, sorry, spoiler alert, 3 years old, 2 years old now.
Watch it. Just watch it already.
Watch it. But Gladys Knight's in the movie, and so when we recorded her music, they had me source connect in for that session. In Vogue is in the movie. I got to go to their recording sessions as well, and just be involved in every musical aspect, just so that if insight was needed, when it came to the songs, and that's rare, that a composer would be invited to watch and participate in the recording session of the songs and give feedback. I didn't want to give Gladys Knight feedback. I'm sorry, I didn't want to, but they were asking me to say something. It was, it just sounded like her. It was great, and then also, like, I just have to mention, it's just because I'm tumbling down this rabbit hole of memories. There's a moment where we're on set, and they're like, okay, Gladys Knight is requesting that the composer come to her trailer and rehearse the song. And I go in there, and it's literally the security guard opens the door, and it's literally just the two of us.
Oh.
And thankfully, I thought just, enough of what ifs to print out a transcription of sheet music where she improvised during her session. So I had it transcribed and took the sheet music with me, just literally had it with me. And it was just like one of those things where you can't plan that you'll need this stuff, but the idea of trying the best you can to be prepared, I think paid off, So
the power of being prepared, just in case.
I mean,
Last night needs you to come to her trailer.
I was like, who knows? I'm like, I didn't think that was going to happen, but stranger things probably have happened. So here I am, So, yeah.
What a dream, though. That's super cool. That soundtrack is great, and it's really cool how like pieces of the score also have to do a lot of like world building that the original movie doesn't really do, because the original movie, takes place in the city, whereas
exactly
the sequel takes place
and
in
that was
Zamunda.
the part I was actually kind of nervous about. We're sitting on set, and one of the producers turns to me. I've never worked with him before, and he's saying words like, we need to start thinking about what the sound of Zamunda is. I'm thinking, okay, this is the make or break point he's talking about. He wants to tell the story, because a lot of the movie takes place in Zamunda in this movie. In the first movie, they come to America and they spend a lot of time there. In this movie,
so it's fine that you just have a bunch of Nile Rodgers songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great. Like, don't get me wrong. I just want to.
Of course.
No, we love Nile Rodgers.
Very upfront about that. An absolute legend, and also like for 80s kids, coming to America is a big deal. Like all of us grew up watching Coming to America over the edited version, over and over again on cable. And like it just becomes one of your favorite movies. So to be able to do the sequel it's again like that's a pretty heavy task.
I didn't think it was true. I was like, okay, they're just saying that because I'm in the room, and sure. And they're like, yeah, you're gonna meet with him. He's coming to town next week. I'm like, maybe they're gonna say something happened and he couldn't do it, And they followed through. They're like, all right, so this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna fly you to set, and you're gonna be there for 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, this is happening. They're not joking. joking. It's a real deal. And it was.
So for that movie, you didn't work to a temp track at all, right? Like you just.
You know what? There was very little temp in that movie, and also I think that's one of those rare cases where we talk about we needed to do a spotting session, and we just dove into the movie and just started writing music. A rare situation. And I think part of that was probably because the pandemic had thrown everything, into no one knows how to do anything traditionally anymore.
Right.
And so it just became a matter of just solving problems as they came up and being creative, because so much stuff was shut down. I mean, I'm so thankful that I had that to work on. It kind of gave me something to focus on, and it became this thing besides planting things in the backyard to the point where it's full of plants, and then still doing more. It became the other thing that I was doing. I'm sure you guys worked on your backyard quite a bit, but yeah, Coming to America became my outlet for just something else to think about, very interesting time, I'm so thankful for that, because it was a daunting time, right? It's like,
absolutely. I feel like we've all kind of, buried it a little bit, but start to think back on how weird and difficult and, bizarre.
Just so much uncertainty. I mean, honestly, we were recording that. I remember on the way to the session, or a day or two before the session, the director calls me and he said, I just got off the phone and something just happened that's going to change everything about the movie. We're still going to record, but don't worry. But something changed everything. What he meant was Paramount had sold the movie to Amazon, and it was basically, in Paramount's eyes, it was already a success because they sold the movie for twice of what it cost. So there's always already a profit. In terms of the models of how is a streaming movie, going to make money. Like, it was like everyone was nervous. It was supposed to be out for Christmas, and he had gone on Saturday Night Live and announced that it was going to be out in theaters, and it's like, that's crazy. So magical to be a part of that. I could talk about Coming to America all day long. Trust
Well,
me.
I think it's also super cool that you built something that is very like transportive and that, creates fantasy and magic for others to enjoy. But it was also kind of that for you and got you through this really tough moment. So it's a testament, I think, to music and sort of why we have this show.
Oh yeah, exactly. Good.
Can I ask who's playing guitar on that soundtrack? That guy's amazing. Or woman,
Eric
whoever's
Walls,
playing.
Eric Walls did most of the guitar. If it's something I sent or the score, Eric Walls did all the guitar. And again, it was one of those fun things where it's fun but not fun, where everyone, all woodwinds had to be recorded at home. So that means that a person would have to have a setup already. We originally were going to do a third choir session, and that third choir session became 5 vocalists who were set up to record at home in their bedroom or wherever they're at. Drums, bass, guitar, organ. Well, organ, we went to a church. It was just me and the organist, and completely socially distant. And we recorded our organ, I think, around July of that year. So that was, pandemic was still pretty raging as far as, should we even be doing this? You know what I mean? But everyone was like kind of one at a time, flying in their tracks from wherever they were and sending it off to our engineer to mix after our orchestra session happened. But the guitar, Eric Walls was doing all that. And it's funny, like we had a lot of, like you said, with him specifically, a lot of different styles that we were able to do. Some were more romantic or acoustic guitar. Some were very, African rhythms and stuff. Some more R&B. Some, this is like all over. And that score, honestly, the reason I get excited about talking about it is because it kind of, I feel like it's one of the first times where I had a very large canvas to just be me, because the director was very supportive of, I don't know, have fun with it. Like, that's a comment you don't always get, when we're doing this stuff. And there was plenty of music to have fun with in terms of the amount of minutes needed. And I think like it's definitely one that, in terms of the test of time, people will identify as sounding like me when, the whatever the me sound gets out there. I think people will go back to that and go, oh yeah, I totally hear that. Because like, you think of someone like John Williams. I think if you go back to the Gilligan's Island TV show or Lost in Space, where he was one of the writers or the composer for, you don't think of, like E.T. or Jurassic Park, but when you hear that, you hear the remnants of what became that later. Like you hear his DNA on those things. And hopefully it won't take me that many years for people to want to go back and hear, oh wait, he did Coming to America? And they go 30 years, whatever. But yeah, so it's all good.
So what kind of musical research did you do for that film?
Good question. We ended up having to write for a couple of, I guess it's called Pan-African instruments. The kora was one of the instruments that we had at the coronation scene, which is the party. It's kind of a giant, almost looks like a tabla with strings coming out of it, or a sitar or something, it sits straight up and down. I had to write for that. There was some, lots of use of percussion. Our percussionist, Sidney Hobson, he also had to record completely remotely. He was recording Um, as I think at the same time, on that window of the recording session for the strings and brass, he was sending files in that I was going home to check later. But I had a giant meeting with another percussionist before I hired him, and he spent an hour just showing me a warehouse full of percussion, and just different things. Like I took videos of everything that I could, just so that when it came around, this was like after I landed the gig, but like a year before we did any recording, things that I can go back. Oh, I have a video of this instrument. Do you know where this is? Can you find this? And then also, I did a little bit of research on Swahili as a language. In the funeral scene, the music, the lyrics don't actually appear in that scene. They appear. I'll just say again. I always get this weird thing about spoilers, but just after the funeral, some lyrics that translate "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound," but it's sung in Swahili. So I just did a Google Translate of those lyrics and put them to rhythms and harmonized it. And you probably see it in I think there's a behind the scenes that Amazon did on the music of where we're in the session. We recorded at Sunset Sound with, I think it might have been 8 vocalists or 9 at that session, the second recording session. But that was specifically recorded for that funeral scene. So I was just playing with a lot of things, looking for languages that would, Zamunda, that place, it's fictional, but it's supposed to take place in West Africa. So looking to see what languages they actually speak there are, all things that are kind of contribute to the authenticity. So, if someone from that, area actually sees the movie, whenever they see it, they actually hear languages spoken in their native tongue and go, oh, wow, someone sees us, you know what I mean? As opposed to just some fake made up syllables or whatever. And then also our woodwind, since you asked, woodwind, world woodwind player, you always have to have one in a movie like this. Pedro Eustache ended up bringing out some really crazy instruments. I think one of them is the contrabass flute, which actually it's like super giant. It's not played, sideways like that. It looks almost like a bass clarinet times 2. And he like sings and plays at the same time when he's doing it, and he's like dancing around when he plays.
Oh, wow.
Pretty crazy. That's on the behind the scenes thing that Amazon did too.
I'm gonna have to check that out. I'm out of breath listening to that description.
Oh, really? You should be. It looks crazy, and it's funny. Like I just thought, as an experiment, I'm gonna document everything I can as we're doing this because there's nothing else to do, as you know. But it ended up being fun when we just decided to put something together about how it all came together. Mostly iPhone footage because at our recording session, no camera crews were allowed at the time. So I took a couple cameras and set them up in different places and just made sure to get this. Well, I thought it was historic. We were only like the second or third session to record orchestra at Fox since they had reopened. I think we recorded in, I want to say September or October of 2021. I don't even know. Like, what a blur. What a blur it's all become. But
what's time?
Yeah. October 2020. But, that was that.
So I have to ask, and it sounds like you have an incredible amount of heart for the score to coming to America too. Do you have a favorite score or another score that you've done that you feel like is going to be part of your legacy, or that you just had a great time making?
Just before that, I had done a score that I feel like people will reference later. It was a very fun one called Proximity. It was a completely indie film. It did get distribution, but it actually came out. It was released at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. It was one of those things I remember. when movie theaters were trying to give people something to do, they would sell popcorn, but they weren't showing movies. So I remember going and buying two gigantic, almost, it looked like garbage bag sized bags of popcorn. When that movie had its premiere, it was kind of a, not pay-per-view, but it was on like Showtime, one of those things, and you could rent it or download it or purchase it. And we had our little premiere at home. But that was one that I got to record the whole brass section at Skywalker Ranch. And before I did that, I actually hired a tuba player, Peter Blake Cooper, as a member of our union here. Went to his place and recorded tuba samples because it was an alien abduction sci-fi adventure movie and kind of an old Amblin style. I definitely recommend checking that out because that was another one similar where I spent a lot of time recording these samples before I really started diving into the actual scoring. And then after that, when we went and recorded our brass section, normally you wouldn't do this, but I had 3 tubas on the session and had them panned hard right, center and left, and tried to get a kind of an alien-esque, I don't know, UFO-ish kind of homage-y kind of thing happening. And it was a labor of love because, sometimes in the indie world, there's a little bit more freedom and, the encouragement to be different and creative and just see what happens and then go with that as opposed to err on the safe side. And the director and I, really had fun. We were able to not only record that score there, but then we were also able to do what's called the final dub at Skywalker Ranch. So we were able to go back up there and live for like a week while they mixed the movie. And it was kind of one of those special projects that, it was way more about the process than it was this thing that people were expecting us to do or waiting for us to do. And, Lakeshore Records put out the score album, and that was my first time having one of my scores mixed by Pat Sullivan, Bernie Grundman, who I'm just a fan of her. She masters all of John Williams stuff, and I could talk to her all day long. So, it was one of those things where it was a nice thing. Proximity was the name of that. The movie and the score. It's an interesting one. It's, like I said, it's indie sci-fi adventure. It's got some very cool visual effects elements to it that you don't expect if you don't know what the movie's about. You're kind of like, oh, okay. So we're having some fun, which is, what it should be about, especially at the indie level.
Do you intentionally try to seek out those kind of genre films or those projects where you think you're going to have a little bit more freedom creatively?
I have to tell you that I did on that one specifically. I was a fan of the director. He'd done a short film that went viral. It was a Boba Fett fan film. That I was like, I got to work with this guy. I just feel like Lucasfilm's going to capture him one day and hire him. I want to make a good impression on him, and I love his visual style. He actually won an Emmy for his main titles to Stranger Things. He's got that visual background.
Wow, yeah.
And he posted some images saying that he was going to be shooting a film called Proximity. It was going to be this 80s throwback action adventure Amblin style film. And I was so excited. I grabbed some of those images from his Kickstarter and put them in a timeline in Final Cut, exported a video and scored it, and then sent it to him. And when I did that, he posted online, if you act now, you'll get some free tracks from our composer, which is those tracks that I composed. And I was like, I guess I'm hired. And I'm not sure if you can really do that, but that's how I actually got that job.
That's so great. You're like, at this point, fun. I better be getting a paycheck.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course. So
only these tracks are
free.
But, the fun thing was, that style and that approach and that theme, that main theme, if you go, actually write it down, the main titles from that movie that I pitched to him is the main title in the movie. He wanted it exactly as it was. Wow. Now I had to re-record everything and re-mock everything up. But he was like, it's just so perfect. It has to be that. He didn't want to change anything. And to a point where if like one note tried to tweak it, was like, that doesn't sound exactly like he wanted it exactly like what he heard. He loved it so much. So that was kind of a fun thing that, and the other thing that two things that he suggested that listeners might get for free, they ended up in the movie, so I was 3 cues down, that worked out.
That's cool. Cool to have that level of trust and that immediate, like, this is clicking. You get me, get you.
Yeah, and then also, honestly, I feel like that's been a little bit of the process in terms of the last 3 or 4 projects that I've done. Typically, I've been hired on before they actually shot or while they were shooting the movie. Not, generally in this industry, composers will come on once they've shot the movie. Now they're looking for some music somewhere under a rock. Maybe he's got it. I don't know. We're running out of time. But now more often than not, it's been, at least for me, more of a success to pursue projects that haven't been shot yet, haven't had a composer. Maybe the director's never even worked with a composer before. And so, I could strike up a thing where it's like, I have ideas that it can go like this. And they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about music yet. Okay. So then you can actually start getting inside their head, hopefully about how they want to tell their story, and come alongside them and do it, as opposed to, just kind of doing your own thing, inviting them into the process of collaborating,
Yeah, it's not an afterthought. It's, embedded into the filmmaking process.
Yeah. I think it's more fun, it's more of a fun process that way, than just work, My thought, my 2 cents.
Before we continue with our episode, here's a word from our sponsor.
Enjoy listening to podcasts and ever wonder, can I make a podcast? But it seems so complicated, and good audio production can take time. What if there was a way to create an amazing podcast easily? Well, now there is. Introducing Podcasting Made Easy from Podtastic Audio. My production team will handle your entire audio production, allowing you to be the star of your show. This is Podcasting Made Easy. How easy? Well, so easy, you don't even have to press record. Now that's easy. Your listeners are waiting. Let's deliver. Sign up for a free strategy call today at podtasticaudio.com/easy.
So did you collaborate with the director to come up with the music for Praise This?
Yeah, that was, it's funny. I pitched really hard for that one because, it was this gospel comedy. Like, I grew up, playing saxophone, as I told you, but a lot of it in church. So I had this whole idea about all these gospel references, my favorite artists that I wanted to do a score in the style of gospel music. And I did a whole pitch video for this thing, and she loved the pitch video. And I had this, the main thing that she loved was this idea I had, because I'm originally from the Chicago area, of using some musicians from Chicago, some from LA, some producers from the gospel record industry from Texas and Atlanta to help produce some of the tracks. Our organist, have him be from Louisville, Kentucky, this guy that's played on a lot of these great records. And just have it be this melting pot, almost like an homage to gospel. And there's a little, kind of a 30-second recap video of that's out there that I put together, just kind of showing how all these different worlds came together. Now, halfway through, our director basically decided that using gospel as part of the approach to scoring wasn't going to be the solution, because the movie has 60 minutes of songs in it. So there's all these gospel mashups, like, because it's a musical, there's so much of that going on that it would be more of the idea of just the traditional comedy score. However, we would still use these players from different parts of the country to bring a subtle iteration of, the actual. These guys are in the trenches of the gospel record business. So they added, their 2 cents of it goes through their filter. Even though it's like a comedy cue, we want to have, it played by their fingers, and like, it's piano, which I could easily just mock it up, but I had to call Philip Feaster from Chicago, who plays for New Direction and Kirk Franklin and, Fred Hammond and all these guys, and Jonathan McReynolds, all these great albums that I love listening to. It has to be him playing it, because he's gonna do something that's true to the culture and the style of what we're talking about. If I have the right people, it's all about having the right people doing it, And then again, that became really the real magical, fun moment for me, to have all my favorite, because I'm still, that's why I ordered this special edition here as my third pitch for the Sabrina soundtrack, is because you can open it up and you look and see all the names of the players are actually on here, and you can go, who's the keyboard? Oh, Randy Kerber. Like, Randy Kerber's playing on this album. I actually reached out to him a year ago to play some demos for a pianistic solo piano pieces for an idea for something I wanted to pitch for. I would not know who to call if his name wasn't in the credits somewhere, So a lot of these guys, and you think I'm kidding, right? Why would you think I'm kidding? But when I was in Chicago last week, I went through old gospel CD collection in Illinois. I found a couple other CDs. Just looking through credits, some of the guys on the Praise This producing team, these are old albums that they did, and I'm like, they did this? I had no idea.
They
like,
show
I'm
up,
fans of theirs.
Liner notes.
I'm fans of theirs, so I'm like, Dad, do you mind if I steal these? Because I want to listen to the whole thing now. But their name is in the credits. I would never know. Some of these albums are like 10 years old.
It's making me miss the CD booklet. Making me miss that feeling. Of just.
I love that. You know what? I'm gonna really nerd out for a moment. Okay, so I opened this up. First thing I did, my older brother and I used to do this. You take the booklet out, smell it.
Yeah,
it smells new, like a new CD.
Even that crack of the jewel case. This is all ASMR for people that miss CDs now.
It's so old school, nostalgic. The smell of a new liner notes. It's like, it's yours. You own it.
It's
unless you go sell it back to a CD, used CD store or whatever. There's a vibe and a smell to that too. Exactly. So yeah.
Bring back Tower Records.
Yeah. I think we're all on board for that. All in the same boat. But that's good stuff. And Proximity CD actually had a physical copy too. I think they did. I want to say 500 copies, something like that. But it was nice. I hate to toot my own. There's a little video that I did where I was opening up. I always dreamed of this moment. That here we were in the middle of a pandemic, opening up the box of CDs that the label had shipped to me and showing the audience that they were available now. But it was like, I'm at home, and if I send these out, I'm spreading COVID technically, so I guess I'll keep them. No, I think I mailed a bunch out in the mail. I'm sure COVID died by the time the recipient got
Yeah, you had some time in transit.
Or did I make this pandemic last one extra year? I don't know what I did. Yeah, but that was fun, actually having a physical thing, sent from the label and just be like, I got it.
Yeah.
Great. There's credits
all
on
those
it.
efforts actually amounted to a something as opposed to
a physical thing. That thing, I'm trying to think of when they started. So that movie came out in 2020, like March or April of that year, and I was playing my demos for someone in 2016, actually, when I did what's called the music and sound design lab at Skywalker Ranch. It was the first time I got to go up there. We were able to play our reel for all the other folks up there, and I had some clips that I helped me win the demo or helped me win the gig in my reel from that. So yeah, 4 years, and now is finally holding a CD. Similar to Praise This, like 3.5, 4 years from the time that I heard about the movie to the time it actually got released. I do like passion projects. I guess you can tell, like things that, so I'm hoping that, one day that'll land me probably, I'm assuming, in the animated world, because I know that those things aren't cranked out overnight.
Oh yeah, no, I want that for you. I feel like people also don't, with the speed of content, people don't recognize how long production are. I think the average person doesn't know that it'll take 4 years, 10 years for something to be released, and it's done. And all that time, real people have been putting a lot of love into it. So that's
absolutely
great.
Yeah, I love it, and I love celebrating with knowing that was a thing.
And I think like that, I think people also kind of wonder. I wonder, like, as a layperson and somebody that's not a composer, what do you feel as the expert on this makes a really great score? If you had to define the elements of a great score, what would that be for you?
For me, honestly, I think it would be if you can see the movie, by listening to the music. Mm. And it could be a sound designy score. It could be a thematic score. I like thematic stuff where you can hum the melody or whatever. It doesn't have to be that, but I think if you can close your eyes and still see the movie, and that can be like, I don't mean like the music has to like be so whatever that it needs to always exist on its own, but I mean like you need to be able to turn the picture off and feel like, I could see where this is. I could see the characters. I could see whatever's happening or whatever the premise was. It makes sense, because there's some things where, you listen to. I listen to a lot of soundtracks in the car. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a fan of this stuff. So when I listen, and I don't know, maybe I haven't seen the movie, but I love the composer. If I go in my head, oh, something's happening here. Oh, this is someone just did this. Oh, someone's falling here because it's going da 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 da. Like there's a descending feeling. Like to me, like that music's probably effective because it's telling me something story wise. I might not see exactly what it is, but I can feel it. That it's doing something specific. It's not just wallpaper, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that answer.
But
is there a director that when you watch their films you're like, I need to link up with this person because I just have
there's a lot of people
ideas.
I have a whole list actually of people that I want to work with. But I think it's funny. Here's what I always think. I always think every single composer in the entire history and universe of scoring anything, they all want to work with Steven Spielberg. That's what I think. And they know it's not going to happen. That's what I think in my mind. And, what I will say is I hope that I could link up with someone. I think it would be a gift to link up with someone who you just kind of finish each other's sentences and they are prolific, and you just literally, they just tell you when the film's due, and it's not like you have to chase them down or anything, and there's always going to be other things that come up here and there, but that there would be one person that you just really, they complement your every, to your core, like the things that you aspire to do creatively, and they just provide you with images to write music to. A 50-year collaboration, 60 years, that sounds almost impossible. I don't even know, you're thinking about streaming and media, where all the stuff, the idea of film scoring as an industry would be in 50 years. I hope it exists, but it'd be great to get, something really, really significant out of one person that's just a wellspring of creativity and wants to take risks. but yeah, I think there's a lot of people that I think are interesting. But typically they will have their person. So, and I keep going back to coming to America. I'm fortunate to have been able to work with Craig Brewer because he had worked with Scott Bomar, composer, many times over before working with me on that. And it was just kind of one of those fun things that, when I met him, I was like, okay, I know people probably say this a lot, but when Hustle and Flow came out, my wife and I would go around the house just saying, whoop that trick, whoop that trick. Like, it was just a fun thing, like a pop culture moment to do, and to share that with him and not just be like blowing smoke. Like, I was actually thought he did something that wasn't easy to do, which was make the audience feel something for characters that they might not think that they would feel something for on a universal level. That was pretty cool, what he pulled off. And it was just like one of those things where I was like, I had no way of just reaching out to him or meeting with him. But, to be working with him was like, this guy is great. Like, he literally does great movies. Like, he doesn't do things that are unwatchable. Like, you want to watch his movies. So that was a gift, and a blessing. So, yeah, I guess I could throw Steven Spielberg in there. I mean, I'm just like, the reality of that. I'm just like,
hey, we're all manifesting Spielberg. We're all putting it.
Here's what I'll say. Something that he produced would be great, and to have his input, I think that would be a dream, I did get to work with Rick Famuyiwa. I was a fan of his. He did the movie Dope, and he's gotten really, really in with the Lucasfilm guys and really heavily involved in the Mandalorian and Boba Fett stuff and a lot of stuff they have coming up. We my name was submitted for a series of short films that were going to be shown within the game Fortnite, and since we're both members of the Sundance family, because I did that thing, I was connected with him and ran into him several times. And you're talking about the whole stalking thing. Like, I was a big fan of his, actually. I was like, if there's any one person out of the entire Sundance family, I feel like this guy, his range, like, if you look at his work, he has a very wide range of stuff that he can do, and it's all compelling within its own universe. I was like, I want to invest in trying to make a connection with this guy, and my name was pitched, and he was like, Jermaine, I know that guy. Wait a minute, who's? And I was like, really? That's how you? I love that. Like, it actually came back. So, I'm gonna throw him back into. I'd love to do a feature with that guy, because he's so laid back, very vibey, and he's just all about feel and vibe and emotion as in terms of listening to the music. Like, he doesn't nitpick specific notes. It's like, if it feels like it's working. Like, he might have some suggestions on how to make the thing better overall, but like, he's just got a vibe about him, and I feel like that's a very fun and creative way. Like, it's a very mentally freeing creativity way to create, as a composer, to go off feel and vibe like that, You see, I don't know, the spoiler alerts, but the season finale of The Last Mandalorian, my mind was kind of blown.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
It was the best episode of the season. I think, his chops really show in moments like that.
I was like, oh, okay. He is who I thought he was. Like, he's great. And I was like, I didn't know that he directed until the end. I didn't look it up or anything. I was like, wait a minute, whoever did this one is a master of their craft. And I was like, okay, that sealed it. Now I sent him a note. It was one of those things where, being able to do that and, remind him that, look, I'm still a fan. Like, this didn't happen because of this. Like, I'm still a fan and have been. Very creative guy.
I kind of feel like you could teach a master class on how to pitch. So I
really?
like it for you. I think this is going to happen.
Oh, man, I like that. I like it. I
think as long as you are prepared for it, you will get it, because you seem to be very good at preparing.
Prepared? You're making people free music.
Oh, you're hilarious. It's funny as you say that. I'm thinking of things that actually happened tonight having to do with something that I did a long time ago. And it was a book that I started reading where he specifically, Rick, is supposed to be directing a movie based off his book. And I didn't tell him I'm reading it yet, but I was going to come up with all these themes and characters and just take my time doing it. So you're talking about building worlds. I think that's something that composers are, I wouldn't say expected to do, but it's definitely a bonus if they could figure out how to do it. For me, I like to use time, to do that. I don't think, the pressure cooker of, can you world build this weekend and on Monday pitch this idea that's going to maybe revolutionize a whole genre and a franchise? For me, that's a little pressure intensive. I like to do things over periods of time, So the fact that you're saying that makes me feel like, you know what? I think I'm going to keep on with that.
It's working.
It's working. Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. Oh, that's good.
Well, Jermaine, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, well, absolutely.
We really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Seems like you guys really love doing this stuff too. So, like you said, that's why we do it, right? Because we actually love it.
That's why we do it.
Anytime you guys want to geek out with a soundtrack nerd,
we just want to sniff some liner notes and.
Yeah, exactly. You know who to go to.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation, Jermaine. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wealth of knowledge and your talents with our fans. It's been awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.
So if you guys want to check out what Jermaine is up to, he is on Twitter and Instagram at Jermaine Stegall. We'll put that in the show notes. He also has his website, which is jermainestegall.com. And you can sample his music. You can look through all his credits. And if you want to follow us, you can follow us on Twitter if it still exists at Twitter. We're at soundtrack_ you're on Twitter and on Instagram at soundtrackcast.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you love the show, you can find us on Patreon as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Jermaine. We are excited to see what is next for you. Hopefully we'll manifest some collaborations together.
I think we did, actually.
Wink, wink.
I think we did.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.